Thanks, Faye. Thank you so much. Let's get started because I think we have a lot of material to cover. So we're going to look at, as the title indicates, we're going to look at measuring impact or outcomes. I think both of those types of indicators we're often using surveys to measure those. And I want to give you kind of some best practices for setting up the process from beginning to end in ActivityInfo based on some of the work that we've done with our users at large scale. So I'm going to break it down into about 4 different stages. So first we'll look at the design. How do you think about these surveys, not just as a one-off exercise, but as an element in your information management system, your monitoring system. Then we'll turn briefly to sampling and look at how to do some very basic sampling as needed. Then third, we'll look at actually doing the field work, actually collecting the data using ActivityInfo's mobile app. And finally, we'll turn to ActivityInfo's notebooks for doing some analysis of the data that we've collected and draw some conclusions about, at least about the results within our participants. Okay, so as Faye said, I'm really hoping that we get some good questions. So if you have questions about anything that I'm presenting here or about ActivityInfo in general, please don't hesitate to put them in the Q&A, right? So not the chat box, but the Q&A, and I'll do my best at the end of the session to answer. All right. So let's start with design. Where does quantitative impact evaluation fit in? So first, I just want to say that this is a huge topic on its own. We did a really interesting webinar last year on this, measuring quantitative impact, which you can find the reporting on our website. We have the link there. But as you'll recall, if you were there in that session, what we're looking to do is to kind of evaluate an indicator. On one hand, if with the program that we're implementing and without the program that we're implementing, right? So what would have happened if we hadn't implemented our program to our participants, right? If it's a training program, what would have happened to our participants if we hadn't done the training, right? On some measure, right? That could be incomes, that could be health outcomes, that could be yields in an agricultural context. So we need to find the difference. But of course, as we talked about in that session, that's essentially what we're asking is what's called a counterfactual, right? And we don't have this multiverse where we can go to a different universe and try, let time pass with and without the intervention. So we have to find some good ways to draw comparisons between them. In some cases, you can look at your participants before and after, but those are some things that you really need to think about and consider alternative evaluation. So I won't go too much into detail. I just do want to flag that today we'll be looking basically at before and after surveys, but there are some good reasons to include, for example, non-participants in your surveys, right? So not just looking at participants before and after, but people inside and outside of your program and so forth. And you can find more details there on this recording. But for the rest of this hour, we're going to look more at the mechanics today, like how to actually do this with ActivityInfo step by step. So we're going to choose the simple scenario, which is really looking at before and after surveys. Okay, and to do that, we're going to use one of my favorite case studies that we use at ActivityInfo. This is our development assistance database. It's an example drawn not from the global south, but from the global north, where I grew up in Pennsylvania. And we will be looking at how to improve maple syrup yields among farmers in Pennsylvania. So this database, you can also find the webinar that we did on that previously. We're going to use this data, and I'll show you how to use this data to test this out for yourself. So for this program, the key indicator that we're looking to measure is the total yield per farm increases 20% among participants, right? So, and second is the yield per tap increases. So when you're harvesting maple syrup, you drill these taps into the trees and to get the syrup in the spring. And yeah, the more sap that you can get from each of those taps, the more effective and efficient your farm is going to be. So keep those in mind. We're going to look at that data, try and anchor this in something concrete today as we go through this. So again, I wanted to talk about these impact surveys, not just as a one-off exercise, like here's a questionnaire, go out and interview a bunch of people, but let's think about this in the context of a full information system, a monitoring system that we're following along over the course of several years. And we want to look at not just surveys, right? So that is something, an in-depth sample, measure outcomes, but we're also collecting information in our trackers on different activities, on training events, on our outputs, right? Our farm visits, communication that we're doing, and linking both the surveys and the trackers back to the registration information, right? When we register participants in our program, we have a lot of valuable information about them. And when it comes to doing the surveys, we don't want to have to collect all that information again. And we want to be able to include that data in our analysis. How did participation in different activities influence outcomes, right? What about people who attended trainings? Were they more likely to experience more positive outcomes than people who did participate in other activities? Which activities were the most effective? Those are the kinds of questions that you can answer when you use a relational database like ActivityInfo to connect all of these pieces together. So this is just a quick overview of how these things link together, right? We have here the registry. We're collecting information about farms, about individuals, and then looking at the loans that we're giving, the training that we're providing, and then following up surveys on the farms. Right, and these farms, they're linked to our reference data. So where are they geographically? Which producer associations are they linked to, and so forth. So that's all a little bit abstract. Let's open up ActivityInfo and take a look at this database. So this comes from our template library. So you can go right now, or if you want to do this after the presentation, and take a look at this dummy database for yourself, so you can walk through these exercises on your own. We just bring on over the web browser to our screen. Faye, do you see the web browser now? Did I do that right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So in our template library here under support templates, we've got this development assistance project here. And you can get started with this template. You just create a copy of it, play around with it, and then you can do most of these exercises on your own to practice. So let's look here. I've already created a copy of this for our presentation today. And you can see this is my database in ActivityInfo. And I've got folders for these different pieces of information about my program, from the registry, where I'm tracking farms, individuals, right? So these are the different farms that we've registered that are going to participate in this program to promote maple syrup, the maple syrup industry in Pennsylvania. I can view that on map, take a look at where they are. I grew up somewhere up here in the north, yeah, here in central Pennsylvania. And you can see where all of our farms are that we've enrolled in our program. They're actually mostly towards the lake here, Zooming out, again, this is in Pennsylvania on the east coast of the US. All right, so we've got our registry here where we've got all of our farms. We've also got a list of the individuals that we're working with, who might be farm owners or purchasers, or working in the producer association. Then of course we've got our producer organizations that we're going to support. Then we've got our list of trackers here, where we can track all of the trainings that we've done, the topics. These are our outcome, the kind of day-to-day monitoring. But the subject of today's webinar is really about these surveys, right? So if we want to know what was the outcome of all of these activities, or what was the impact of these activities? Did we actually, through these trainings, manage to improve yields? Then a survey, we might not be able to go back and measure this data or collect this data from every single farm that we work with. We might not have the resources, right? The reason to sample, to take a smaller group for a survey, the only reason is it comes down to research, right? If you had infinite amount of money, you just go talk to everybody. But of course, our programs, they don't have infinite amount of money or time. So it can be very useful to take a small survey of the farms, maybe annually, maybe quarterly, depending on how much you're going to collect. So that's kind of the context that we're working in. Maybe a several-year development program where we want to see this impact. So as I already got ahead of myself. I started to talk about sampling. Again, this is a subject that I can and have talked for hours and hours about. So we did a series of webinars on sampling in 2021. So we'll just do a quick refresher on sampling, right? So two key terms to know when you're doing sampling are population and sample, right? So our population is the whole group that we're talking about, whereas the sample is the specific households or farm or individuals that we're talking about. Now, maybe I can open this up. I haven't made this very interactive today, unfortunately, but I can make it a little bit interactive. So in this example that I've just given of this maple syrup program, what would be our population here? If we're measuring the increase in yield, or if we want to measure the increase in yield, what would our population be in this example? Just put the answer in the chat and I'll read them aloud as I see answers. Yeah, what are our population? We're measuring farm yields. Anybody? Just go ahead and put it in the chat. Oh, farming households, total farms in the area. Yeah, I see. Good. Farming households. Yeah, they might be households. They might be bigger groups, but the farms. Yeah, Nico and Abena, absolutely right. So we've got. If we go back to our database here, our population, that's in our registry here. We've got these farms here. We've got, I think I have in my dummy data set about 54 farms, so 55 different farms that we're working with. So that's our population, right? Okay. And so the sample is, maybe we can't afford to travel around and visit all 55 farms. So we're going to take a sample of those farms. In today's example, we're going to use a really small sample just as for the purposes of demonstration. But before we can do the sample, we need what's called a sample frame, right? So a sample frame is a list of all of the members of the population, right? So Abena and Nico, you mentioned that, yeah, farms is our population, but in order to do a sample, we need actually, in order to do a good sample, we need an actual list of each one of those farms that's part of our population to make sure that we can draw a unbiased sample of that. So in just really two scenarios here to think about how to map this out. So in the first scenario, where you're sampling only from among your participants, right? And I did warn you, that's maybe not always, that's not always such a great idea. But if you're doing that, then your registry form is simply your sample frame, right? So this list of farms that I have in my database, that's my frame, okay? Now, in a second scenario where you're going to include not just people who participated in your program, but maybe all farms, right? That might give you a better indication of the impact of your program. not just looking before and after, but looking between people who participated and didn't participate. Then you would need a separate form that includes all of the participants as well as a list of comparable non-participants. But for today, for the sake of this example, we're going to look at scenario 1. So we're going to be only sampling from among our participants. Okay, so once we have our sample frame, then we can randomly select the individual farms that we're going to include in our survey, right? And this sample can also include your inclusion probabilities and your weights, right? So in ActivityInfo, what we're going to do is we're going to create this kind of chain from our registry, right, where we have a list of all of the farms. And then we're going to create a sample form where we have just a list of the people that we've selected, or sorry, just a list of the farms that we've selected. And then we're going to link a questionnaire or survey to that sample, right? And that way our questionnaire, our survey questionnaire via the sample ID can always be linked back to, first of all, the sample, so that we get our weights or inclusion probabilities from our sample, and also to make sure that we're only interviewing people that we actually selected, right? We're not doing convenience sampling, but we can also pull in the data from our registry, right, from our sample frame. So all of the details that we have about our beneficiaries, our participants, we can pull that into our questionnaire and into our analysis, of course. All right. So how do you draw a sample? How do you go from a sample frame 54 farms and choose, for example, 10? You need a tool. We don't have this built into ActivityInfo yet, so you'll need an extra tool for this. The three that I see most often are from easy to hardest, or maybe not from easiest to hardest, but from easiest to most sophisticated. You can do this with Excel, and that's what we'll do today. We'll do a quick example with Excel. You can do this with R, which is an open source environment language project for statistical computing. There's a survey package, which is very powerful. Or you can do this with SPSS. SPSS has a complex sampling module that comes with a nice wizard-like dialogue to select multi-stage samples, stratified samples, clustered samples, and so forth. Right. So I think in general, Excel, I mean, you could probably do most types of sampling with Excel if you're creative enough, but I think Excel is a good tool for simple random sampling, right? When we're just taking everybody in our sample has a equal chance of being selected. Or some really basic stratified sampling. If you want to do cluster sampling, especially probability proportionate to size, which is a very useful technique, then you probably going to need to use R or SPSS. For more details on this, I refer you to our training on complex samples, where we really go into the details of this. But for today's kind of more practical example, I want to focus on the simplest case, this Excel, right? So, and in Excel, we're also going to do some basic calculation to find the weights of our sample item. So I want to introduce two more vocabulary words. There will be a quiz at the end. The first one is inclusion probability, often abbreviated as IP. So inclusion probability, if you look at every person in your population, you know, the inclusion probability is the chance or the probability that each of those people have of being selected in your sample. So if we've got our 55 people in our sample, and we're going to choose 10 of them, then we just divide 10 by 55, and that gives us, well, I made it a bit easier on this slide, right? If we have 50 people in our sample, and we sample 10 of them, then we're just going to do 10 divided by 5, and that means that everybody in our sample has a 20% chance of being selected. Or if you write this as a decimal proportion, they have a 20.2 probability of being selected. Now, what you're probably most used to thinking about and working with in analyzing surveys is weights. But weights are actually just the reciprocal. They're just the inverse of your inclusion probability. So you can just flip this equation around, not this equation, but this expression around. And so we take 10 over 50 and we do 50 over 10. And that means that if everybody in our sample has a 20% chance of being selected in our sample, then that would mean that everybody has a weight of 5, right? Another way of thinking about that is every respondent is, representing 5 people in your population. That's kind of an intuitive way to think about it. All right. Okay, but that's some of the theory. Let's give this a try. We're going to go back to ActivityInfo. So I've got my list of farms here, and remember this list of farms here. This is my population, and this is also my sample because I've got a list of every member of my population. So what I'm going to do is from ActivityInfo, I'm going to export this. I'm going to export this to Excel. I'm going to open this up, and what I want to do is I want to randomly select 10 farms from this list. So how do I do that? Let me zoom in just a little bit. Faye, is that good? Can you kind of see my screen? This is in Excel, obviously. This is I'm on my Linux development machine, so this is LibreOffice, but Excel works exactly the same way. Yeah, Faye, is that okay? Yeah,
it's okay.
I could zoom in more. 200%.
Yeah, that's
okay.
Right.
So for each of these 54 here, well, now we've got 55. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new column. So I'm just going to put it in a header random number, and I'm going to use a function in Excel called rand, just R-A-N-D, no arguments, and that gives me a random number. And I can just fill down, and that gives me a random number for every single member of my population. And then what I can do is just sort this list. So I'm going to sort, and then I'm going to choose my random number as the sort key, and that will, the top 10 farms here are going to be my sample, right? That gives me just an easy way to randomly select in an unbiased way 10 of the 55 farms. Okay, so this is a simple random sample, right? Every single farm here has the same chance of being selected. You should note every time I make a change here, if I type something here, the random numbers are going to change, right? So that's why we sort. We sort first, and then just you can delete this column. It doesn't matter. You're just going to keep the result of the sort in the top 10 items. Okay. So now I've got in Excel, I've got my list of sample. I can just kind of highlight them here. These are the farms that I'm going to include in my very small sample, all right? And now I want to go and I'm going to create a form for my, just to keep track of the sample, right? To keep track of the households, sorry, the farms that I've sampled. I've already done this, so I'm just going to create a new folder in ActivityInfo survey just to walk through this. So what am I going to do? I'm going to create a new form that holds my sample. Now, one thing that's very convenient is that if you're doing the same survey in several ways, right? So if we're expecting to do periodic surveys to measure or monitor the outcome or impact through the course of the program, then we don't need 5 different sample forms. We can keep this sample all together. So first thing I'm going to do is add a serial number, I just want a single sample number that identifies each one of my farms in this household. Okay, so that's going to be generated by ActivityInfo. Then, if we look at this diagram here, this is my little diagram, right? For my sample, I want to reference back to my farm registry because I want to know which. I don't want just the name of a farm. I want to actually have that link so I can pull in all of the information about the farm that we already have in our registry. So I'm going to add a reference field and then choose farm as the field that I'm referencing. I'm going to make that required, hit done. And the third thing that I'm going to add, let me add this first actually, is I'm going to add the wave, right? So which wave of the survey is this? Is this year one, or this might be baseline, followed by year one, year two, and year three. That way, as I go through my program, I don't have to redo all of this work. I've got my sample frame already set up. I've got my sample set up, and I can draw them. Yeah, I can reuse the same structure. Okay, so now I've got my empty form. I'm going to take the farms that I sampled. I've got the name of the farm here, which is actually my key field. That's how I'm identifying farms in my database. So the only thing that I need to add in here is another column for the wave. So this is going to be my baseline, for example. These are the farms in my baseline sample. So I'll take this, select this. I'm going to use our importer just to import this here. And so what you can see is that the name of the farm, that's been automatically matched to my registry. So that forms the link. And I've got a wave here that indicates 1, 2, 3, 4, do I have 10? Yeah, I've got 10. That indicates, yeah, 10 records will be added. And ActivityInfo has assigned a number to each one of these samples, right? So now I've got my sample, and the only thing that I need is, oh, I forgot the inclusion probability, right? So let's calculate the inclusion probability. That's the other thing that we can do here. So remember, we talked about every member of your population is going to have we want to be able to calculate that probability being selected in the sample. And here it's very, very easy. I have 55 farms and I've selected 10. That means that every farm in my sample, every farm in my population has the same 18% chance of being selected, right? And so since this is the same here for everybody, I can just add this as a calculated field. So let me just add a calculated field for the inclusion probability. If we have time at the end, we can go back and do a stratified sample, which is, I think, a little bit more complicated, but it's still doable with Excel. Okay, so now I've got each of my farms, and I've got, in this wave at least, the inclusion probability is 0.18. Now, one reason for maybe not making this a calculated field, but a quantity field, is that in different waves you might have different inclusion probabilities. You might use different sample sizes. Your population might change, and so in most cases you're going to model this as a quantity field. All right. So now we've got our sample, and so now we can create our questionnaire, right? So our survey questionnaire. This is going to be linked back to my sample. This way, the surveyors, will look in the field work. They can work off of that sample list that we give them, and they can simply enter the number of the person. They can find the farm with the address and just enter the number. So sample ID, make that required. We'll also make it a key field. That way, we can be sure that interviewers don't survey or interview the same farm twice. Okay. Now here, this is just an ID, so we might want to add a calculated field just to check, right? So let's put the farm name And then in the instructions, please confirm the name of the farm with the interviewee. And this calculated field, so we're going to follow a path from the sample ID to the farm to the name of the farm, right? And we use this dot notation. So it's like if it's like a VLOOKUP, or if you're a database person, this is like a left join. You have her joining from the sample to the farm, and then getting the name of the farm and showing that to the interviewer, so that they're sure that they're interviewing the right person. And then I'll just add one. I have a more complete questionnaire, but we'll just add one simple one here. Is how many taps did you have this year? Right? And then we can make that required. Needs taps. So let's look at how this appears in the web-based data interface, right? So here I'm going to choose the sample ID, the ID that I've been sent to interview. It's confirming, it's showing me the name of that farm, and then I can provide the number of taps that were drilled this year. Okay, so that's again the structure that we have here is going from our survey, linking that to our sample, and all the way back to our registry, so that we keep everything linked together. Okay, so we've got our sample, we've had our sample frame, that was part of our registration process. We have our annual sample now, so we can see the 10 farms that we've sampled, at least for this wave. And now let's move on to the third section, which is the actual field work, right? So how do we actually get a team together and collect this data from the field? So the nice thing about this structure is that our sample form that's going to provide the roadmap for our interviewers. And then because it's linked to our registry form, we have all the information that we need to plan, organize, right? To plan those trips. We're also going to look at inviting surveyors. We'll invite them by email. If you're working with your members of your own team, then you'll just give them access to the forms, just like you would to ActivityInfo normally. If you're hiring casual labor or people that are just there for the survey, we recommend using a Google account that's associated with the Android device. That makes logging in and authenticating really easy. We'll see that in a moment. Okay, so train your surveyors, obviously, on your questionnaire. Install the app from the Android Play Store, or you can add it to your phone directly from the website by just going to activityinfo.org and logging in. Download the database offline so that you can work without an internet connection, and then you're ready to go. So let's walk through that in practical terms. So the first thing is this planning our field work. So we have our sample form here now, and this gives us our roadmap of how to collect this data. So what I have right here is I have a list of farm names. But if I've got to send out teams, or maybe I'm doing all the field work and I've got to plan my, when am I going to go where am I going to drive first? We could use a bit more information. And since our sample is linked to our registry, we can pull in information. So let me do this slowly. I'm just going to go to select columns. And then from here, I can bring in related information about the farm. Right, so if I'm planning a survey, I've got the name of the farm, but the mailing address might be very useful, right? That's going to give me something I can put into my GPS. Obviously, the city and zip code. Your surveyors, they're not going to need the inclusion probability, so you can remove that. And we only want the baseline, right? So we can filter on that. Is there anything else that we need here? Let's see. Yeah, I think that's good. We've got, let's put in the owner, right? So we know who to talk to. Okay. And we can, because this is linked to the owner, we can also bring in related information about the owner, like their phone number, which could be super useful, right? So now what we've got is a bit more of a roadmap for our field work. And you can see here, I can sort this by city or by county or zip code, so that I can plan when I'm going to, how I'm going to actually approach this field work. And this is also a great thing. You can export this, print this out, give this to your teams, because these numbers, this gives them a really easy way to find the person, call them if necessary, and then they have the number that they just need to plug into their survey, right? Now let's look at inviting people to do the survey. I'm going to do that in database settings. I'm going to go to impact surveys, click on database settings. Now the first thing I had in my slide is to think about the role that you want to give here. So I've got a role here already for field staff. You'll notice here that I've given them the ability to view all of our records, add any records, edit records, and export the records. So this is useful if you've got a small team. I mean, if you're working with like a huge number of interviewers, you might want to add more restrictive permissions. You can narrow this down so that people can only see their own data that they submitted, or only the ones that have been assigned to them. So there's more options, but this is a pretty good baseline for this permission. I'm not allowing the field staff to delete data. Once they've added it, I prefer that I review that back maybe in the office and delete it if necessary. I don't want to give them that permission. Okay, so I've got my role set up. I'll just save that here, and now I can go and I have already done it. Let me remove this. So I'm going to invite myself. I've got an old Samsung here. Then I'm going to use my personal Gmail address. You guys can spam me afterwards now. I'm going to assign this role for field staff. And I can also choose what to give access to. So maybe you don't want to give access to everything, maybe just the surveys. That's up to you. I'm going to give access to the registry and the surveys. I don't need the trackers or the dashboards for the surveys. So, okay, that's good. Now, the other thing I mentioned in my slide is to pay attention to language. So if I invite somebody and I have a translation of my surveys, we haven't really looked at that today, but you can translate your surveys into different languages. You might be working with multilingual teams or in multiple regions. Then if you're inviting somebody new, you're going to want to make sure that you choose their language carefully. So for example, this email address doesn't have an account on ActivityInfo yet. So if I invite this person, I'm going to be able to choose the language, their language, right? And that means that they'll get the invite in Spanish or in Arabic or Bahasa, whatever it might be, Farsi, Pashto, and all of their questionnaires will be in that language right away on the mobile app. So they can change it later if they want to, but in principle, this makes it easy. So pay attention to that language when you invite your interviewers. Okay, so I've invited my surveyor to the database. Let's take a look at the mobile app. I'm going to try and mirror my device on my screen here just because it looks a little bit more realistic. If it doesn't work, I'll use the browser emulation. Let's log out here. Okay. No, I'm going to try. Yes, give permission, allow. 2 seconds, I promise. Yes, okay. Okay, so here we go. I've got it. So I'm just going to go basically to my ActivityInfo app that I've got installed. Can you see the mobile device, Faye? My Samsung?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I've got ActivityInfo already installed. I'm going to open it up, and I'll log in. Since I'm using a Gmail, that's going to use my Google account login. I'm already logged in on this device, so that goes right to the application. So you can see here, I've got access to one database, and I have access to the 2 folders that I granted myself access to. I mentioned in the beginning, downloading for offline use. That's this button here at the top. So if you plan to use the application offline without an internet connection, you just have to download it to your device. That downloads everything to your mobile app, at least everything that you have permission to view. So you can go back and make changes or review data if you have permission to later. It's not just one way. So you can see here I have the same kind of forms that I have on in ActivityInfo, right? I just have access to fewer of them, so I have the access to the registry. So I could go back and I could look up, for example, I could look up some information about a specific farmer. See, yeah, okay, this is the person I'm supposed to be interviewing. Where's the information? Go back here, but let's go ahead and fill out a survey now, and fill out my annual survey. And oops, I'll just go ahead and delete one of these here so that I can, you can see on the screen, it stopped me from entering a duplicate. So let me go and change that to see, I'm hoisted by my own petard here. We'll delete. Did I give myself delete permissions? No, I didn't. All right, this validation stuff is too good. Let's go.
Alex, are you still sharing your mobile phone? Because we don't see it anymore.
Sorry, here we go.
Yeah, now we see it.
Okay, so let's just go ahead and we'll edit one of these here. So I think I deleted one of them. Yeah, so now I can add, for example, sample number 10. That's not what I wanted to do. We'll just go ahead and edit this. So I've selected my sample, right? So this is number 18. That's coming from my sample frame. And I'm just gonna I get the confirmation that this is the farm name, right? The owner of the farm. You choose the date of the survey, today, and just fill out the rest of the questions in this. Yeah, can you see it again? Okay. So if you've used mobile data collection apps before, this should look pretty familiar. It just allows you to go question by question and complete the data. Different types of fields, you can make changes here. You have instructions. And then I can leave any comments that I have about, I really liked the program, and go ahead and finish. As soon as I have an internet connection, that's going to get synchronized. So we can see here back on my web database. That one. I can see the last edited survey, which was here, Jim. You can see the comment that I added through the mobile app, and you have a full history of who added that, what they changed, and where this data came from. Okay, so that I hope gives you a pretty good idea of the mobile app. I think Faye's put a lot of good. Oops, I'm giving my pin code here. I think we'll switch back to the web application for now. And now let's go back to our slides. I think, did we cover everything in field work? Yeah, so we've collected the data. I mean, some nice things about the ActivityInfo mobile app is that synchronization works really well. So I go to the form and I make a change in the design, like, maybe I want to have another option here, like maybe. As soon as I save this form and my field staff are connected, that gets synchronized automatically. They don't have to download a new version or anything like that. So that makes it pretty easy to work with. Great. Okay, for the last step, let's take a look at the analysis. We're coming to the end of the hour, so we'll, I think, just do a basic introduction to this. I just really want to show you how to use the weights that we've set up. And I think we'll have probably another session on survey analysis with ActivityInfo. But we had it here in our sample. We have these inclusion probabilities. So when it comes to our farm survey, we can also add a calculated value here for our questionnaire to calculate the weight, right? Which is again the reciprocal of the inclusion probability, and so just 1 over the inclusion probability. So now that we've got that saved, we can use that to well, what a statistician would say is estimate the population parameters. But what I hear a lot, just more colloquially, is extrapolate, right? We want to see, we've got a sample of 10 people. How do we extrapolate that to our population, right? And that's actually exactly what the weight does. So let's add a notebook here. A notebook is a great way to put together many different types of analysis. So I can let's go and add a pivot table here. And yeah, maybe the first thing I want to see is my sample size. So let's add just a count, right? So this is the raw count. I have 19 interviews over 2 different waves, right? That wave is coming from the sample, right? So I can see here in year 1, I have 9, and in year 2, I have 10. Let's add another chart. Let's look at one of our key things is how many of our farmers are actually cultivating maple syrup, right? That's one of the impacts that we're looking at, is the percentage of farmers who are taking part in maple syrup. So what I'm going to do here is I'm not going to use the count, because that gives me the number of people in my sample. What I want is I want the number of people in my population. And that's exactly what the weight gives me. So I'm going to drag the weight onto my measures. I'm going to sum up the weights. And what you can see is that the sum reflects essentially the number of people in my population. So if I break this down by wave, see I have, at least in year 2, I have 55, those 55 farmers, right? So when you add up all of your weights, just as a mathematical identity, you're going to get your total population size. And we can use that. I'm going to hide year 1. We're going to use that to extrapolate to our population. So for example, let's look at how many people, how many of our farmers actually set taps in, or how many of them are actually cultivating maple syrup in year 2. So here you can see, I'm not going to add the percentages here, that if we extrapolate using the weights, 44 farmers we estimate are cultivating maple syrup, which is 80% of our population. All of our weights are equal, so this is also 80% of our sample. But if you have unequal weights because of stratification or multi-stage sampling, then what you would see here is the 80% of your population, right? So we can save this here. This will show us the percentage of farmers tapping maple syrup in year 2. And now we can do some comparison over year to see, did we have an increase in the number of farmers, right? Did at least judging, and again, please Please be careful when drawing conclusions from pre and post surveys, but let's actually just see what the survey says, right? So if I drag, I want this weight as my measure. And so I can rename this because this is actually at this point, this is the number of farmers in program, the number of participating farmers, right? That's what the weight gives us. And I want to break that down by wave, right? That wave comes from my annual sample. So I didn't have to collect that in my questionnaire because I already had that in my sample. Put that in the rows. So, and then we're going to look at this key question here. Did you set tax? And then let's make a bar chart of this, right? And so what you can see, let's flip this so that we do this by wave. Yeah, so we can see that from year 1 to year 2, at least within our program, we saw a significant increase. I should not use the word significant here. Well, we saw a large increase in the number of farmers tapping maple syrup. We can go ahead and hide. Let's just hide the nose. We don't care about the nose. Yeah, so then you can see from year 1 to year 2 that change over time. Now, can we conclude that this is due to our program? You'll have to watch our other webinar about causal inference, but this at least gives us some numbers to work with. So because I want to leave some time for questions, I'm going to stop here and not go further into analysis. I think Faye's put in quite a bunch of resources where you can look further. And we will be doing more webinars and analysis this year, so we'll have a chance to dig into this. Let me turn now to the questions and see what, and see what we can do. Okay, so Siring asked how to do random sampling digitally. I hope I answered that with our Excel. We have another anonymous question. When we were doing the Excel, we have a question. What did you sort by, ascending or descending? That's an interesting question. But because we're using random numbers, it doesn't actually matter whether we sort by ascending or descending, whether we take the top 10 or the bottom 10. That will have the same effect of giving everybody 10%, everybody this 18% chance of being included in the sample. So I hope that makes sense. Ascending or descending doesn't matter. Rasudan asks about the cost of the software after the trial. That is, I guess, an important question. If you're not using ActivityInfo already, you can find our pricing on our website. ActivityInfo is supported by our users, so every deployment of ActivityInfo contributes to the development and maintenance of ActivityInfo. Your share of those costs depend on the number of users. So, for example, up to 75 users is 4,800 euros per year. As if you adopt ActivityInfo in your whole organization, then the costs go down significantly. All right. So take a look at that. Feel free to get in touch with us if you're interested in learning more about purchasing or using or experimenting with ActivityInfo. Abdi says how to draw sample frame for complex data analysis using R. That's a great question. We won't have time to go into that today, but I do want to point you in the right direction. So if you want to draw your sample using R, you're going to start with your sample frame. So we're going to go to the farm, and maybe we do have time. Yeah. Abdi, let me go ahead and unmute your mic so that Abdi, can you hear me? So yeah, if we're interested in, let me just open up a new project. If you want to do this with R, I'll point you in the right direction. You can click on from export, rather than exporting it to Excel, you can export via the API and click on query using R. And you can just copy and paste that snippet. Let me just quickly open up a fresh project. Let me just make this a bit bigger. Can you hear me, Abdi? Did I understand your question correctly?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Right. So appearance, let me go to 200%. Okay, so from that export, you can just copy and paste this code snippet. This gives you the same data we were looking at in ActivityInfo. No, maybe. What did I do? Oh, I think I'm not signed in here. Is that right? Oh, I have to share this with myself. 1 second. I'm using a dummy account for this demonstration. Okay. So now I can rerun that. And if you look at this data frame that we get from the API, it's exactly what the data that we're looking at in ActivityInfo or Excel. And so from here we can use, in this case, we can just use the base R sample function, right? So we're gonna sample the X is we're going to sample, I think that's the number, so n row of our data frame, and then the size 10. And that gives us the rows, the indexes of the farms, right? So then if I look at, let's say that's my sample, then this gives me the 10 rows that have been randomly sampled. So same thing as we were doing in Excel. What's really powerful is there's this package called the survey package, which I don't have installed right now, but that allows you to do things like clustered sampling, stratified, multi-stage sampling, and that's really a topic for another day. But I hope that gives you an idea. Okay. Let's see. I think we have time for maybe just 1 or 2 more questions. I see some questions from about variance, standard deviation, skewness, biasness. Those we're going to have to leave for another day. But I see 1 or 2 basic questions about ActivityInfo. Epithani is asking about photos and files. So yeah, definitely. If you go to this survey here, the survey questionnaire that we started, click on form settings and then click on add field. You can add an attachment field. And with that, you can take a photo with your mobile phone, or so if you're doing that on the web, you'll have a chance to browse. If I do this on my camera, on my mobile phone, then it will give us the chance to take a photo, right? So, but yeah, with your camera, and so then you can take a photo directly from the field and store that in your database, and then you can view that. Abdi, oh, that's another great sampling question. I'm so sorry. I think, unfortunately, we're going to have to stop here for now, but we do have a great webinar on complex sampling. I'll send you the link, Abdi. That is we asked about a widespread and scattered population with limited access to reach and security fragile areas. Yeah, we could spend a whole lot, and we have spent a whole hour on that. So I'll send you to if you look at our webinar on complex samples, this is maybe a good. We'll cover quite a few of those points. Maybe we'll do that session again sometime, because that's really quite a challenging and interesting topic. Okay. So I think we'll stop here. Thank you so much for joining us today.